Welcome back to the Kathy Romano Show on B101. I am absolutely thrilled to be kicking off our very first celebrity interview with this man. You know him from Deadpool, The Proposal, The Croods, and countless other films. Ryan Reynolds is joining us today to talk about John Candy, I Like Me. It's a documentary that he produced, and there's an exclusive presentation of this film telling John's story by the people who knew him best. And there's a screening that's taking place tonight at the Miller Theater at 7 o'clock. Ryan is going to be there for a Q&A. Please welcome Ryan Reynolds to the show. Hi, Ryan.
Nice. Hello.
Hi, guys. How are you? Nice to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks so much for being our very first celebrity guest. This gives us like a special bond.
Wow, I'm your first celebrity guest, really?
Yes.
Well, you guys are, your name is in the title, Kathy. Doesn't that by virtue make you a celebrity? I don't know.
No, trust me, you're way bigger. We're so excited to talk to you. Ryan, what inspired the documentary? Why John Candy? Do you have a personal connection?
I don't have a personal connection. I have a lifelong kind of obsession and love and appreciation for John. Obviously we're both Canadian, there's a sensibility that I think that comes out of Canada that you can't really wash off, so to speak. And I studied all those guys. I mean, growing up, they were my university. They were my teachers. They were the ones that I sort of, I used to watch John, and I used to watch Dan Aykroyd back and forth. I would watch an old VHS tape. I would rewind it, and I would try to do the lines as fast and as nimbly as like Dan Aykroyd could, or John could, or Bill Murray, or some of these guys. So I love John, and I've always loved John for a couple of reasons. One is that my brother, growing up, he was a big guy, and I could see all the same sort of coping mechanisms kicking in that John had. I don't think John would ever hurt a fly. And my brother was the same way. Every fight I got into as a kid was in defense of my brother. And it was a weird dynamic because he was older than me. He's 2 years older. And John, you know, reminds me a bit of that because, you through the documentary too, you see a lot of, interviews he'll do, and journalists that'll kind of take a shot at his size or his weight, and like that sort of free game to kind of go there and do that. And John never made those jokes. He was very, he was a proud man, and a genuinely a good person when nobody was watching. And that was the thing that really kind of, I think, stuck with me, especially in show business, where behavior that is just abhorrent is tolerated in so many situations that I just saw with him. You could maintain your humanity and still thrive and still do great work and still be a part of this industry. And I think he's inspiring for so many reasons. Even the show we're doing at the Miller Theater in Philly, and the Q&A afterwards will be with Rob Mack and Chris Candy, John's son. Even though it's a short, hour or so or whatever we're going to do after the doc screening, there's not enough time ever to talk about John. This has been one of my favorite projects I've ever been lucky enough to work on.
Well, he's such a beloved figure in comedy. When doing the documentary, did you find out anything that surprised you?
Well, it was funny. It was just some you could do a documentary on making the documentary. I mean, it was like getting Bill Murray to sit down for a doc is like I don't know what the hoops he used to only accept a fax, but now I know nobody has that technology anymore. So I would I found somebody who was a friend of a friend of a friend who gave me a number, and I called the number, and it was a Greek shipping company was on the voicemail, and I thought, no, 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 no. I just left a message, and I kept leaving messages, and finally he called back, and he said right away, first thing out of his mouth, right, who would you say is the godfather of the spit take? And I said, the spit take. Well, I mean, I love vaudeville onward, I kind of obsessed with all that world. So I felt like I could kind of hang in this conversation, and I could tell it was like a test of some kind. And I said, well, I don't know. I would say Desi Arnaz kind of did it for, it was a big thing in the media when it happened. And he went, wrong. It was Danny Thomas.
Oh my.
And I and I was like, oh, I failed. And I remembered I made this quick analogy. I said, well, look, I think of it like Canada, right? Canada invented basketball, Naismith. In this instance, Canada, Desi Arnaz is Canada, and the United States is Danny Thomas. You guys perfected it. You perfected this basketball and the spit take. So maybe we can find some way to do this document, and he said, okay, we'll sit down, we'll do the documentary. And then he ghosted me for weeks, and I finally tracked him down again. And yeah, it was wild. Dan Aykroyd was another one that was just crazy because he spent basically, I took 2 months to find him. No one knew where he was. He was up in Canada somewhere. And I finally got a hold of him, and he says, I'll tell you what, kid, yeah, come up here. We'll sit down, we'll have some dinner. You spend the night. The next morning, we'll do the interview, and you get the F out, with this Canadian accent. So, Mr. Aykroyd, that would be my honor. I will be there whenever you say, and I did.
Has he
And
heard you do that impression? Because that's really good.
well, well, before we could track him down, Dan's eulogy is actually one of the most beautifully written eulogies I've ever heard in my life for John, and it's in the movie. And for the longest time, we didn't have Dan, so I did it, and it was. It drove me nuts. But a couple people thought it was him, but it wasn't. No, now we have him doing it. Dan Aykroyd does the eulogy himself. He re-recorded it, and it's beautiful and so very John. But these are the guys I studied. I watched them, all the if they're, sitting across from your heroes like that was, and they don't disappoint. I mean, that's amazing.
Key, yeah.
Yeah, that there's still a humanity and humility there, and they'll sit and chat and just kind of, treat everyone kindly. I don't know. I really was beautiful.
Do you have a favorite John Candy movie?
Do I have a favorite John Candy movie? Yes, Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. I mean, it's in all the work I do. Everything I produce or write has a nod to it somewhere. All three Deadpool movies feature the book that he's reading in the airport, in Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, The Canadian Mounted. And so I always license it from Paramount. I literally have to license it. It's ridiculous. And I always have it tucked under my arm in one of the scenes somewhere. In Deadpool and Wolverine, if you watch Planes, Trains, and Automobiles and then watch Deadpool and Wolverine, you see it's kind of in the same footprint. Even there's a scene in Planes, Trains where Steve Martin eviscerates John Candy's character in a motel room, just goes at him and like snaps. And in Deadpool and Wolverine, there's a scene in a van right before we fight inside this Honda Odyssey, where Wolverine snaps at Deadpool and just goes on this rant, this monologue. And I remember Hugh said that I have more lines in this one scene than I've had collectively in every movie Wolverine has ever featured in. And he just tears Deadpool apart. And in both scenes, Steve Martin feels like he went a little too far. You can kind of tell. And Wolverine even feels like he went just a step too far, even for Deadpool. And I find that movie to be a kind of wellspring of inspiration in everything I write or produce.
And by the way, I asked the question because I didn't know if like all of them were your favorite.
No, I do love a lot of them. You know what I love most is that, like, if you watch SCTV, which was, really kind of a cult hit, wildly weird, fun sort of sketch comedy show. This is back in the day. Today, everyone, especially kids, are so afraid to suck at anything, because we live in such a curated world, right? Everything we see is perfection, and perfection really is a disease, I think. And if you watch these old SCTV sketches, so many of them are genius, and so many of them are just terrible. And that's what I love about it, is that they were experimenting live in front of everybody on TV. This is back when there were very few stations to watch. So wide audience, the same way social media would be now, but they were okay with it. They were all right with not hitting it out of the park. They're okay with experimenting and failing and getting up again and trying something else. And I just see there's so many lessons in that I see with my own kids. I always say, don't waste your mistakes. Make mistakes and then don't waste them. And John and that whole group and that whole generation, they did it. The emperor had no clothes, just in front of everybody.
You mentioned a lot of names in this film, including Steve Martin, Bill Murray, Martin Short, Dan Aykroyd, Tom Hanks. The film is directed by his son, Colin Hanks. And then tonight you're doing a Q&A. I'm just naming all the people involved in this. Does Rob McElhenney have anything to do with this film, or is he just coming with you because it's Philly?
He is my emotional support star. I thought Philly is, Chris Candy will be there as well, John's son. So the connect, obviously there's the strongest of connections there, but Rob is a big John Candy fan. And Rob is also a gigantic Philadelphia fan, as you know. And I'm not talking just about the sports. I'm talking about the community of Philadelphia. Philly is in his blood, and I just thought I'd love to do this because Rob's one of my best friends, and I'd like him to be with me there. It's his town. It's where he comes from. So much of the things that I love and enjoy in my life, I owe to Rob. And I think that that's important to acknowledge is wherever I can. And getting to do it on a stage, at the Miller Theater in Philly, that sounds like as good a place as any, if you ask me.
I've known Rob for years. Please tell him I said hello. You guys will be at the Miller Theater tonight, the screening of the documentary John Candy, I Like Me, at 7 o'clock tonight. Tickets are still available. You can go see the movie and then sit in on the Q&A, and you can go to ensembleartsphilly.org. Ryan, thank you so much for being the very first celebrity guest on the Kathy Romano Show.
Well, it's all downhill from here, guys. Thank you so much. I really do. I genuinely appreciate it.